Hey guys, Dalek44 here. I need no introduction, but I got one anyway. And welcome to another instalment of Remember That? This is why I look at a TV show, movie, video game, or character that's forgotten by many people but remembered by few. For tonight's instalment of Remember That, I'm going to take you back in time to the early 90s, when we were introduced to two lovable rag dolls who got up to their own adventures while their owner was none the wiser. This is Rosie and Jim.
Rosie and Jim, chugging along on the old rag doll.
Rosie and Jim is a British children's television programme which was produced by Ragdoll Productions, the British production company who brought us many other children's shows along with Rosie and Jim, including Playbots, Run, Tots TV, Teletubbies and In the Night Garden, to name a few, and aired on the Children's ITV block on ITV from September 3rd, 1990 to the 16th of May 2000. The programme was then repeated periodically on CITV until the 23rd of July 2004. The show follows Rosie and Jim, two rag dolls who live aboard a narrowboat called the Ragdoll, which is from Birmingham. There they sit with a concertina on their lap and come alive when no one is looking to explore the world that they pass on the rivers and canals across England. They learn to experience things by following the Ragdoll's owner on his or her adventures, and secretly join in with them. Usually they end up causing trouble, but they are never detected because no one ever sees them. Rosie and Jim are just so lovable and innocent that you can't help but love their antics, even when they're getting into trouble. The two main characters we follow in the show are Rosie and Jim, two rag dolls that live on the boat, and that come to life when no one is looking. Rosie, puppeteered and voiced by Rebecca Nagan, is a female rag doll.
No fuck!
During her adventures, she carries a bag that has her name written on it. She wears a yellow dress and has long, shaggy black hair. She and Jim often refer to the boat driver as Fizzgog, John Cunliffe, Loopy Loobs, or just Loopy, Pat Hutchins, and Tootie, Neil Brewer. She sometimes calls Jim a noggin, and she's the most serious of the two, taking things a little more seriously than Jim, but still having that playful side that Jim has, especially when it comes to exploring and making mischief.
Rosie, it's getting darker.
It's nothing to worry about, Robin. It's just the dark shadow of a big tower.
It's blocking out the sun.
Even though Rosie could sometimes take things a little more seriously than Jim could in situations, you could tell that she still had that playful side that Jim has, and the two are just the perfect match. Jim, puppeteered and voiced by Robin Stevens, who also voiced Tom in Tots TV, is a male rag doll.
You are a genius! How'd you figure that out?
In their adventures, he can be seen carrying a notebook, which he sometimes draws things that he has seen. He has short red hair and wears light brown trousers, a shirt with a red scarf, a white with red striped socks, brown boots, and a brown waistcoat. I absolutely adore Jim's voice because it just sounds so youthful and playful.
Jim,
What?
what are you doing, Nugget?
Fishing.
What for?
For fish.
Fishing
Oh,
for fish.
oh.
And as I mentioned, the guy puppeteering and voicing him also voiced Tom in Tots TV.
Hey, cat.
Yeah.
Who's been eating all our biscuits?
And his voice has just become so iconic in British television, and I'm really surprised that he hasn't appeared in anything else. Or maybe I just need to do better research on the guy. I don't know if these two actors have ever worked in anything else together aside from Rosie and Jim, but you can tell how much chemistry they had with each other during the production. And it shows that the two had a great friendship with each other, since they worked off each other so superbly. It's almost as if they're real life siblings or have been great friends since their childhood. I don't know what the story behind it is, but the two are just great together. And it makes me wonder why we never see or hear them together in other projects. The two are just such a great duo. One of the great things about Rosie and Jim's formula is that even though they come to life and get up to all sorts of shenanigans around the world on their travels, no one seems to notice that they're there except for children. Duck, also voiced by Robin Stevens, is an animatronic wooden model of a duck who sits on top of the ragdoll boat. He doesn't talk, but can be heard quacking and flapping his wings when there are no humans around to let Rosie and Jim know that the coast is clear.
Quack, 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 quack.
Thanks, Duck. We're moving, Rosie.
Where are we going to, Jim?
In some episodes, either Rosie or Jim give him a kiss. He is the only character to directly interact with all three presenters, as only Cunliffe directly addressed Rosie and Jim. Duck was always one of my favourite parts of Rosie and Jim because of how colourful he was. And I've always had an interest in ducks for some reason. It might be due to the fact that me and my brother used to feed the ducks at Tune Valley Lake when we were kids. And even to this day I still love watching ducks swim around and fly around whenever I see them and get the chance to see them. And unlike Rosie and Jim, Duck never communicated in the same way we did. He could only communicate through quacks, and Rosie and Jim would always understand what he was trying to tell them.
Quack, quack, quack. Ducky's quacking his song.
Time for home.
We stayed too long.
Come on.
And Duck has become one of the most iconic pieces of Rosie and Jim, getting to be shown on the opening logo of the show. Throughout the Ragdoll's run, the boat was acquired by 3 owners, each one playing a role according to their real-life profession. The first owner was the late John Cunliffe, an author who writes stories about Rosie and Jim based upon his own everyday outings. Cunliffe is the only presenter to break the fourth wall in the show, delivering pieces to the camera and narration throughout every episode. John is the presenter that sticks out the most to me because I remember watching his episodes the most when I was younger. And it's enjoyable to see how forgetful he can be at times when he wants to buy stuff like paint or stuff at the supermarket. Whenever John writes down the stories while telling it to the audience, we get it through a short cutout animated short done by Alan Rogers and Peter Lang, using the same technique that they used for Ivor the Engine. Having 2D animated stories at the end of each episode was a really nice touch for the series, since we see most of the live action characters, and having the 2D bits is just a nice blend of the two. And as you know, I love 2D animation and live action hybrids. John is also the only presenter who directly addresses Rosie and Jim on screen. John Cunliffe, as you all know, was the original creator and writer for the classic Postman Pat series, so most people would remember him for that. But this was the first time to my recollection that he wrote in a TV series and starred in a TV series, so he managed to do 2 in 1. And it's very ironic because in one episode of Rosie and Jim, we get to see John try on a postman's hat when he's looking for a new hat to replace his old one that he lost. And they do a clever nod to Postman Pat since he wrote those episodes in the old show.
Well, what about the postman's hat? Well, I could get up early in the morning and deliver the letters before I set out on the ragdoll. It's a bit small for me, though.
He thinks he's Postman Pat! Postman Pat! Postman Pat!
I think that's a really nice touch when the presenter of a show makes a reference to another one of his creations in the show. Nice touch. At the end of Series 2, John left the show and the ragdoll was left in the capable hands of the late Pat Hutchins, who you may remember as the author and writer for Titch. Pat was an illustrator who creates pictures, gathering ideas from her adventures. Each episode would start with Pat finishing a drawing of Rosie and Jim and end with an illustration, again by Pat, based upon the episode. At the end of each episode, Duck would be hidden in the picture, with Rosie and Jim trying to find him. Rather than just have Pat completely take John's place and do the exact same thing that he did in his time in the show, they had to do her own thing, which was drawing and colouring in pictures for books. Pat also illustrated the books and artwork for the video releases between 1995 and 1996, and she's the only female presenter of the series. While I do prefer John's time on the show the most, since that was what I was most used to as a kid, I do enjoy some of the Pat Hutchins episodes as well. 2 of my favourite episodes is one where she goes to watch a Chinese circus performance with acrobatics, and the other one is where she goes to his heritage railway where she gets to help with a steam train operation. Obviously because my love of trains. While the Pat series is enjoyable, and I do love the episode where they take a look at a steam locomotive, I don't think it's as memorable as the John Cunliffe series. but it's still enjoyable nonetheless. When Pat left, the ragdoll was then left again in the capable hands of Neil Brewer, a singer and musician who plays a harmonica and a concertina. Neil would begin each episode looking at his harmonica, followed by Rosie and Jim talking about and introducing him. Brewer would often end each episode with a song played on his concertina, prompted by Rosie and Jim, who would leave the instrument for him to play, next to Duck. At the end of each episode, the ragdolls would often join in with the song, unknown to Neil. Brewer became the longest serving owner of the boat and was the only one to star in a live theatre tour of the show in 1999 and 2000. Brewer is the only presenter who has stayed for more than 2 series, and he is the last surviving presenter of the show, since Pat Hutchins passed away in 2017 and John Cunliffe in 2018. Transitioning from John to Pat to Neil is very similar to how they worked with the presenters in the Sooty Show, moving on from older presenters to going to a younger presenter, just to bring some new life into the show. The show was very popular among viewers during its run, gaining many VHS tape releases, tons of merchandise sold of the characters, mainly Rosie and Jim plushies, books based on the episodes and the stories that were told by John, and even audio cassette tapes narrated by John Cunliffe with the stories that were shown out for each episode. In 1993, the British Waterways Board teamed up with the creators of Rosie and Jim to create Stay Safe Near Water with Rosie and Jim, using the same animation style they used for John's story segments. This was done to highlight water safety and awareness for young children.
It's always important to know what the signs mean, Jim. I bet you don't know what this one means.
That's easy, Noggin. It's someone swimming and they're crossed out. It means, no swimming.
You must never swim in rivers or canals, Jim.
Since Rosie and Jim were super popular at the time, it made sense for them to use the characters, especially since they mainly travel on water in a canal boat. So having Rosie and Jim be the faces of staying safe near water tips was a really clever idea, and it was a good way to get kids aware of water safety and whatnot. So Rosie and Jim were very popular in more ways than one. And during the 2000s, a bumper pack DVD was released by Platform Entertainment, but only contained most episodes of Series 1. Since then, the rest of the show has never been re-released on DVD or Blu-ray, which I find a real shame because this show really is a gem. It's another one of those shows that proves that you don't have to have big grand adventures or 3-act formula to make a good show. All you had to do was write entertaining stories and be realistic at times. And that was one of the things that Ragdoll Productions was best known for, being realistic with their stories, despite having 2 ragdolls and a wooden duck that comes to life, but that's beside the point. And because John Cunliffe started writing and starring in the series, this was very much like Postman Pat, having each episode just show a everyday life sort of thing, a day in the life of John, Pat and Neil. And the episodes were quite half and half upon rewatching them. Some episodes being very educational, teaching John Cunliffe as well as the viewers about various things, and other episodes just being a slice of life episode having some funny moments in them. So say in one episode you'll learn about locks that take you up a hill on a boat, another episode you'll have trees scratching the ragdoll and John going out to get some paint to repaint it, another one would have you go into a flour mill learning about how bread is made, and another one would be John going to the supermarket and Rosie and Jim following without anyone noticing. The educational episodes of the show were kind of like being at school, except you had 2 ragdolls and a boat driver teaching you stuff as opposed to your boring teachers. And that is kind of cool looking back at it. But some kids of today's generation probably wouldn't want to see that when they watch a TV series. They would just want some fun and excitement. But luckily the show was never to the point where it wasn't exciting at all. We had some good humour thrown into the educational episodes and some decent songs sung by Rosie and Jim. And while Pat and Neil's runs on the show were really good, I always find myself going back to John Cunliffe's time on the show more, because that's the show I'm most familiar with. And I don't know if it has been done so in the show or if I just don't remember, but I don't think they ever explained why the presenters in the show were ever changed within the show. I mean, I have no idea if there was an on-screen explanation to why each boat runner was changed throughout the show's run. And unless I need to do some better research on the show, I think it would have been nice if they did an episode of the show from John Cunliffe's series, like what they did with the last episode of Sooty & Co., where the final episode of that series was Matthew handing over Sooty and his friends over to Richard, showing an on-screen reason to why Matthew retired from being Sooty's presenter. So the same thing could have been done with Rosie and Jim when John and Pat left the boat and left them in the capable hands of Neil. But I don't think they've ever done that in show. And looking back, it's kind of weird that there was no explanation to why each owner of the boat left. But nevertheless, it's still a fun show with fun stories and fun characters, and it's definitely worth a watch if you haven't watched it in a while or haven't seen it for ages and want a break from all the thrilling, exciting cartoons and kids shows that we're used to getting these days. The show also had a lot of iconic lines that I still remember to this day, like this old classic.
Abracadabra, London Zoo.
And the show's also the reason why I say this classic line whenever I see broccoli at the supermarket or at home. Rosie and Jim is one of the most iconic and underrated British television series that were made for children of the times, and I find it a real shame that it doesn't get as much attention as it did back in the 90s. But there are some people that do remember Rosie and Jim. Hell, at Bristol Harbours there's a guy who owns a boat and has big Rosie and Jim plushies looking out the window. It just shows how much of an impact the show has left on people many years later. Rosie and Jim is another one of those shows that doesn't have to rely on big grand storylines or big chase scenes to be enjoyable. It's like the Postman Pat series, where just the simple things in life is more than enough. And it plays off those simple everyday life things very well in my opinion. So if you're looking for a show that doesn't have to have any chase scenes or big adventures and it's just a day in the life of two rag dolls and a boat driver, then this is definitely the show to go to. I would highly recommend showing this to your kids if you want to give them a break from all the big exciting shows that we're used to getting these days. It's a fun slice of life series that's definitely worth a watch if you love old 90s entertainment. I hope you guys enjoyed my look back at Rosie and Jim, and be sure to look out for more Remember That segments in the future. I'm Dalek44, and I'll see you next time, folks.
The end.
I don't know if these two actors have ever done anything else together in their career, but I Right, let's try again. I don't know if the actors who played Rosie and Jim had ever shown
Abracadabra, London Zoo.